Hello and welcome to the Raising Killin podcast. My name is Marsh Naidu and I blog at raisingkillin.org, where we curate resources for families experiencing disabilities. In today's episode 145, I chat with Torben Jensen from Joni and Friends. As always, remember the content provided on this podcast is for your information only, and if you seek advice for your specific situation, to contact a trained professional. So grab that cup of coffee, put your feet up, and get ready for some awesome conversation. Good morning and welcome to the Raising Killin podcast. My name is Marsh Naidu, and this morning I am talking with Torben Jensen, who is the Ministry Relations Manager in Nashville, Tennessee, and the organization that he works with is called Joni and Friends. Welcome to the Raising Killin podcast, Torben.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I would love to know a little something about yourself first. We got to meet each other at Creative Ability Spring Gala about 2 weeks ago here in Dyersburg, Tennessee. Would you mind delving into your origin story before we talk about Joni and Friends, please?
No, happy to. So yeah, I'm from Denmark originally. So I grew up in Denmark in Northern Europe for the first 26 years of my life. And then ever since, I have worked and lived all over the world. I have lived in England. I've lived in Ukraine as a missionary. I've lived in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia for a while as well. And then I've been in a lot of global missions positions. I've been in different types of global missions. I've worked as a counselor as well for many years, again, and journalist and that type of stuff. So all sorts of different things that I've done. Have lived in the United States the last 18 years. I'm married to an American. So we met in England doing a Youth with a Mission discipleship training work there. We have a 13 and a 10 and a 7-year-old. All three of them are boys. And we live in Nashville. And yeah, I've been working for Joni and Friends now the last 4 years, coming up on 4 years.
Thank you for that, Torben. Now, Joni and Friends, can you tell us more about this organization and the programs that are run through Joni and Friends?
Absolutely. So Joni and Friends is a large national and international disability ministry. So it was started by Joni Eareckson Tada. So she was a young 17-year-old girl that decided to go for a swim. And unfortunately, she jumped into the water where the lake was shallow. She hit the bottom and she broke her neck and ended up with quadriplegia as her reality. And she was struggling a lot with that and just trying to see, okay, how do I do life? And was just very depressed and really wanted to end her life at that point. But God started sending people to speak words of hope to her. And it was just a matter of God wanting to meet Joni and say, hey, there's still a purpose to your life. And how Joni and Friends got started was that Joni had learned to paint with a paintbrush in her mouth. And there were some people who had heard about that, and she had done a small art exhibit there in Northern California where she's living. She got invited to a Barbara Walters nationally televised talk show, and that's really how people started hearing about her, and people started writing letters to Joni, just asking questions about disability. So my son has this disability. We have people at our church with these disabilities. My uncle is struggling with this. What do we do? And really at that point, 45 years ago, there were very few, especially in the Christian space, that had done any sort of work with disability ministry. And that's how Joni and Friends started all those years ago, that just, okay, what do we say? How do we help all these different people with all the different questions? And then if we sort of fast forward to today, then Joni and Friends were involved in global ministry. One of the things we do is that we collect used manual wheelchairs, and then we gather those. And then we have agreements with 11 different prisons, one being down in Clifton in South Tennessee, where inmates, while they're incarcerated, then have an opportunity to work in those Joni and Friends shops and take those used wheelchairs and bring them up to like a new condition. We then ship them overseas and send our missions team there, where people in different countries then have an opportunity to get a wheelchair, hear the gospel, and get connected to a local church through our local church partners. So that's sort of the global side. Then at a national level, we work in all sorts of different areas. We do camps and retreats and that type of stuff. But what I do specifically has to do with working with local churches and ministries. So I work with churches of all shapes and sizes. Some have 50 people and some have 10,000 people. Some have 5, 6 different campuses and some are very small local churches. So yeah, I work with churches in all sorts of different ways and try to help them with special needs ministry questions.
So your work specifically, Torben, is it encouraging churches to be more inclusive of persons with disabilities? Talk to us more about that, please.
A survey was done some years ago where they asked 1,100 different churches and congregations the same question, where it's like, would a person who is affected by disability feel welcome in your church? And 99% of the pastors, who are very optimistic people, they said yes, a person with disability would feel welcome at their church. They asked the congregations the same question. 97% of them said yes, a person with disability would feel welcome. So the church thinks, 98% of the church is sort of convinced that people affected by disability would feel welcome at their church. Based on what we know as a ministry from talking to thousands and thousands of families, we know that's not the truth. We will say, based on our own data, that roughly 20% of all churches feel welcoming to families affected by disability. So we work in that space. We have that space between the 98%, that's sort of the perception of the church, and then the 20%, that's the felt reality of the church. So that gap of 78% that we then work in. So just this morning, I was out at a new church that I hadn't connected with before, a little bit outside of Nashville, and talking to them about what does it look like for their church to become a place where families affected by disability start to feel welcome. What does it look like to develop different ministry avenues so people affected by disability feel like they can find a place to belong? And so that's what I do. I work with churches. So some are just getting started in this conversation and had honestly never thought about people affected by disabilities. Then there are other churches that have been engaged in this for many years, and I help them in a different way, of course. But with all of it, the goal, is to help include families affected by disability. And then really the goal we're moving towards, the goal that we have for all churches, is that they'll move beyond just caring for people affected by disability. Not that that's not important. That's super important, and we want to do that and do that well. But the goal really is for churches to become places where individuals affected by disability also get opportunities to serve, also get opportunity to use their gifts. And that, of course, requires that the church has gone through a journey and really a paradigm shift where people in the church no longer look at people affected by disability as people who just need to be served, but that they also see them as, hey, you have gifts, you have abilities, and we want to help you find a way of using those gifts in this church as a blessing to you, as a blessing to us, and as a way of giving glory to God.
You know, Torben, Wendy and I had the same conversation, and it's how do we move beyond the mindset that our families just want to be served, just being given opportunities of, hey, we're having a fun day or we're doing this, which is important. There is a need for those experiences. That's not to take away from it, as you said. But as a community, we have so much of value to offer in terms of our gifts and being given the opportunity not only to be served, but to serve as well, to serve God and to serve others. So what you just said really speaks to me, the combination of the inclusion and the belonging and being welcomed. I think the welcoming is perhaps the first step to that process of saying, we're not specifically saying this is a day for, just a day for individuals with disabilities. more or less every day. How can that be just incorporated in our programming? How can that be incorporated, in our space itself?
The biggest hindrance for families affected by disability, it's almost never physical. It's almost never about that. Again, physical barriers are relatively easy to do something with, where it's like, okay, do we need a ramp for a person in a wheelchair to be able to access the church? We can do that. We can make that happen. But it's almost never the physical barriers. Again, it's the emotional, it's the relational barriers that are more complicated to deal with, because, of course, they're invisible. Again, people don't notice them. They don't see that there is a problem unless they start on this journey of becoming more aware. But I think that's part of what we try to do with churches, is to help them grow in their awareness, is to help them grow and see, like, okay, so there are these families affected by disability. What does it look like for you, for instance, to develop a relationship with them and to dare to ask the kind of questions that you need answers to in order for you as a church to find ways of serving and including this family well? What does that look like? And we talk a lot about that, where it's like we got to get over, so often, again, the main hindrance to special needs ministry is fear. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of, oh gosh, what if I ask the wrong question? What if I use the wrong terminology, etc., etc.? And what we try to teach them is that you got to overcome that fear and just ask those questions, so that you can get to know what is unknown to you. Where it's like, it's okay for a neurotypical family. Again, no special needs family expects a person who is not part of a family affected by disability to know exactly how it is. No one is expecting that. But what families affected by disability long for is for people to just ask questions and to show curiosity and to reach out. And that's when we get to do that in our churches, then those barriers for relationship and barriers for fellowship, they start to then fall to the wayside, right? Where it's like, hey, I may not know exactly how it is to walk in your shoes, but I would love to find out. I would love to know. I would love to learn. Like when I joined Joni and Friends almost 4 years ago, I knew nothing about special needs ministry. I've worked in ministry for 20 plus years, but I knew nothing about it. But I'm a curious person and I know how to ask good questions. So that's what I've done. Just asking questions, sitting down with families whenever I have an opportunity to that, and just ask about their situation, trying to understand, trying to see, okay, what does that look like for you? You have this child here with a disability. You have maybe 2 or 3 children who have different disabilities. Tell me about your everyday reality. Tell me some of the challenges that you guys face. What does that look like? So lots of people are sort of like cautious as far as doing that, because I think we've been conditioned to believe that it is rude to ask questions. But it's not rude to ask questions. We're just trying to understand. We're trying to you can't serve the other person well and include them well if you don't know them. And the only way we can get to know each other is by asking questions, right? So that's a lot what I talk to churches about. Was like, let's get over this fear and this idea that it's rude to ask a question about something that we don't understand. It really isn't. Like, I think about a time I overheard a slightly absurd conversation. It was between there was a young lady who worked in an emergency room in Chicago. So she, of course, had been very busy. She was working on the night shift even. So every night she was there trying to save lives, right? And it was one of those, she was standing there and talking to a young girl, and you could see that young girl was so desperate to sort of relate. So she ended up saying like this, she was like, no, but like, I work with people too, so I understand. And then the nurse asked her, what do you do? And the other girl was like, I work at a gas station, right? It was like, no. It's okay to just say, I don't know how it is to work in an emergency room. I don't know how it is to experience fighting for life and death every night. Just like it's okay for a neurotypical person to tell a family affected by disability, I don't know how this is. I don't know how it is to go to all the different appointments that you have and therapy and unanswered questions that you don't have. I don't know how that is, but I would love to know. I would love to understand. Could you tell me stories so I can understand, right? So getting over that fear and learning to ask good questions, again, to me is so foundational for every type of successful special needs ministry, where it's like, if we just keep everything at arm's length and we're like, no, we don't want to offend anyone, but it's much better to just ask questions. It's much better to take that risk. And then we find out, of course, that we all, of course, have a lot more in common than what separates us. So, but we can't figure that out before we start asking those questions. So it's a lot of what I coach churches in is like, here's how you ask questions. Here's some good questions to ask. Here's some of the fears that are holding you back, and then sort of trying to dispel some of the fear, because sometimes churches have this fear that if we even get engaged in this conversation about special needs ministry, the following Sunday, 10 families affected by disability will show up, and all of them are going to have the most complicated disabilities that none of us have ever heard of, and they're going to have a long list of demands, and if we don't live up to every single demand by the following Sunday, we're terrible people and bad witnesses for God. And people are like, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of fear. And of course, that has never happened, ever. Nothing like that has ever happened. I have never met a family affected by disability that actually comes with a long list of demands. It's not like that. Families affected by disability just want to belong, right? They want to belong in a church. They want to have a family around them that they know that, hey, we are cared for. I can be myself. I can let my hair down. I can also show my weaknesses. I can also show that, hey, this is not an easy journey, because, of course, that's the case for all families affected by disability. That sometimes it just really sucks, right? Sometimes it's just really, really uphill, and you need your church to be a space where that's okay as well, to process those types of realities.
Torben, with something that comes to mind are the summer or the camp programs that you guys have. What is happening in Tennessee in terms of those summer programs?
Yeah, so we have in July, so it's July 21st through 25th for the families, and then the volunteers come on the 20th of July. So we have what is called a family retreat. So we do, I think, 65 or 70 family retreats as an organization all over the country every year, and we do international family retreats as well. So family retreat is a camp that's specifically for families affected by disability. We still have a few openings, so if anybody's listening to this, they want to come and be a part of it, so Joni and Friends.org/Nashville, you'll find information about that. So we'll have 13 families affected by disability. It'll take place in Moscow. That's just an hour outside of Memphis, towards Nashville, sort of like southeast of Memphis. Gorgeous location out there. So 13 families affected by disability will be there, and a lot of volunteers. And what we create really is a special place where all the families can start then to relax and feel at home, because all the other families understand their situation, understand the challenges of being a special needs family, and then you have a wonderful group of volunteers and staff around you who are just there to help you in every possible way. And a big thing that we do there, again, we have all these different things we do throughout the week there. Again, we have chapel, we have worship. Worship is my favorite part, just getting everybody feeling comfortable, just expressing themselves, expressing worship, however they want to do that. And it's a fun, crazy experience to do that as a group like that. We do, we do all sorts of different activities throughout the day. We have different groups. We have children's ministry. We provide buddies, both for the kids affected by disability and those who are siblings who don't have a disability, because we also want to make sure that those siblings have a real special time where they don't have to worry about their sibling who has a disability, right? And then, of course, we do times with mom and dad where we give them an opportunity to connect with other parents who are in the same situation, and some real deep and beautiful friendships are formed there where people feel seen and heard and included. We do bouncy castles and petting zoos and sports activities and all sorts of crazy stuff. But I think the main thing that we as a leadership of the camp that we try to focus on is rest. And last year at the beginning of the family retreat there, I told all the participants that, hey, yeah, I know you have a lanyard with a schedule around your neck, but here's the thing, and you've probably never been told this before, you don't have to do any of those activities that are listed there. I want you to rest. That's more important to me than anything else. So if you as a family, you decide we're just going to sit this thing out, or one of us is not going to go and do that, do it. Please stay away. You don't even have to come and tell us. And you could see the families were a little bit like, is he serious about that? But then as they felt comfortable, they actually, some of them started doing that, just saying like, okay, we're just going to sit this one out. We're not just going to do our own thing. I was like, great, hallelujah, absolutely. And there was a mom that came to us like the third day of a family retreat last year, and it was so beautiful. She just said like, hey, I just did something I haven't done in 5 years. And I was like, oh, great, what's that? I took a nap, she said, right? Because she now felt comfortable enough knowing, hey, my kids are in safe hands with people that are here to help them in every possible way. I can just relax. I can take a nap, right? So for a special needs mom, that's a big deal, right? And to be able to do something like that. And that's the kind of environment that we will be creating for this family retreat again this year. We're there to connect. We're there to have fun. We're there to hear about Jesus. We're there to enjoy each other. We'll have talent show where every single person has a chance to showcase their talent. And again, that's always a fun time. But yeah, we really want to make sure that families get a chance to unplug and to rest and to do that in a safe space. So yeah, anybody that's interested in family retreat, again, whether they want to come as a family or they want to come and volunteer, we need volunteers for all sorts of different roles, either as buddies or to help with some of the different children's programs that we're doing, or I need people as well where I can just sort of point at them and say, hey, I need a sports activity over at the field in an hour. Can you make that happen? And they're ready to run with that. So we have all sorts of different opportunities to serve families there at Family Retreat.
Torben, thank you so much for your time and for the work that you do. And is there anything that you would like, or any words of encouragement that you would like to leave us with?
Yeah, I would like to say that there's good news. Yes, we still have a long way to go as far as like getting more and more churches involved in this conversation. But I can say from working in this area for the past 4 years that more and more churches are waking up. More and more churches are beginning to ask the right kind of questions and to start looking into what does it look like for us as a church to be a welcoming place for families affected by disabilities. So, and if you're listening to this and you're part of a church where you feel like this is an uphill battle, get in touch with me. I would love to connect with you and see whatever I can do to help, whatever Joni and Friends can do to help get this conversation started in your church. Again, that would be my honor to do that. And don't worry about the size of your church. Like I said, mentioned again, I work with some churches that have 45, 50 people, and that is great. We want to help those churches as well. So it's not like, oh, I have to be a part of a large church for Joni and Friends to be interested, or I have to live in Nashville or Memphis or whatever. Not at all. I love getting out to the countryside in Tennessee as well and connect with people and churches all over our wonderful state here.
What would be the best way for someone that wants to contact you, Torben?
The best way would be to email me. So I'm sure you can put it probably in the show notes for the podcast here. So it's my name, so TORBEN.JENSEN, and then at Joni, JONI, and Friends.org. So Torben.Jensen at JoniandFriends.org. That would be the best way of getting a hold of me. Yeah.
Torben, thank you so much once again, and we look forward to working with you and seeing you in the future.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening along on the podcast today. We would really appreciate a rate and review of this podcast episode on your podcast platform. If you would like to contact us, you can reach out to Raising Killen, that's KELLAN, @gmail.com. Tomorrow is June the 14th, and if you are in the Cookeville, Tennessee area, we will be there at the Special Needs Resource Fair hosted by Christy Kirby. Christy is a friend of ours that we met through the Tennessee Partners in Policy Making program. The event is going to be held at Vine Branch Church, and that's 2262 Bowser Road from 10 to 2 p.m. And that's June the 14th. And there are going to be lots of other awesome resources. The Tennessee Caregiver Coalition will be there. Tennessee STEP, the ARC, Family Voices, and Rising Above Ministries. So be sure to stop by. As always, remember, get to the top of your mountain. This is Marsh Naidu signing off.